Thank you so much for having us in your office. This is Conversation with History, and the whole idea is to chronicle your achievements. You have been a two-time governor of Lagos State, two-time minister, and only God knows what's next. And if we would have to ask, what is next for you after this portfolios you've held serving the country?
Well, I think what is next is to stand back and introspect and see perhaps in my own self-challenging way how differently I could have done it and what mistakes, if any, I made. But you don't see your mistakes when you're running. So it's when you pause, you catch your breath, you can actually see, oh, okay, it could have been better there. So I think that's what's next.
There's no how you would say your administration has been perfect. Which will readily come to mind? What are those last minute things you wish you had enough time to do before leaving the office? Because you're just a few days away from using the door.
Okay, so I don't do last minute things. I try to avoid them. Usually they're error prone. They are indicative of a lack of preparation and planning. Where in May, I actually started writing my handing over notes in September of 2022. So I just like to prepare. I like to plan. And I like to envision the next day, knowing, of course, that you don't own that day. It's grace that brings that next day forward. So, of course, there are a few things that have come up in the last minute, things that when I was writing my handing over notes in 2022 September, I didn't see that we will get 1.9 trillion funding for roads from NNPC under the tax credit scheme. But this is the result of a policy that the president initiated in 2019, now taking full traction in the twilight of his term. And that was opportunity to get going again. We had a plan for the roads to fund them, but it's now which road gets what, and going through the procurement process. So all of those things, getting FEC approval, getting all the agreements in place, meeting with all the contractors. So what it gives then is that at least if you can't finish the road, you have built a sustainable funding plan in place, and the next team should continue from where you stopped, not from where you started. So those are the kind of things that are coming through in the last minute. So when people even say, why are we doing this in the twilight of our administration, they probably don't realize that the procurement process started much earlier. There are dozens of memos still waiting, and they just have to flow into the next administration. There are those things that are stayed till the last minute that we could push through. But there's a point where, this is public service, work never ends.
This last 4 years, what would you say are your landmark achievements? This is not somebody saying, oh, you can nod your head like the Agama lizard, but this is you saying, well, I set out to do this, I set out to do this, this is what I've achieved, and I'm very proud of what I've achieved. What are the few ones you can easily highlight?
Well, you see, I think that the public, and I say this with a lot of deference, wants to see concrete and mortar and all of that. But I dwell on measuring other things because I know that those things are not an end in themselves. They're a means to a bigger end. So when we're building infrastructure, roads, bridges, railways by the Ministry of Transport, laying out fiber optic cable through collaboration with the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy, or collaborating with those who are laying gas pipelines across our road network. We're actually building Nigeria's future, Nigeria's prosperity. So when I look back, the stock of infrastructure to GDP was about 20% when this administration came in. It's now 40%. So all of what we had before was 20% of GDP. In 8 years, we doubled it. And it's still not enough. So when I look at that, I feel proud to have been a part of that team. because I know the results and the benefits will be much further ahead. But during that period, the people I've interacted with, the workers, the artisans, the people asphalting our roads, the food vendors, the suppliers, painters, people roofing houses, those were the real people about who those projects really were initiated. But people don't see them. I saw them. I have data of many of them in terms of the numbers we impacted, how many small businesses got to supply sand, roofing sheets, paint, cables, asphalt, and all of that. Because that's what really infrastructure is about. It's driving the economy, creating jobs, creating livelihoods for families. So for me, that was the big thrill.
Okay, which of the projects? Like
Projects,
yes,
look, listen.
that touches your heart the most?
Maybe because I've stayed too long on the job. So I have no emotional attachment to any of those projects, because for me, they're just the final product of a process. That process was integrating with people. So if you ask me which project, it was the people project. That was the key.
This is your second term. The first tenure, you had 3 portfolios, which of course included power.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it was reduced to just work and housing.
Yeah.
Was it that, did you think you were overwhelmed by those 3 portfolios?
Well, I think that it was quite challenging, but certainly not overwhelming. And I think that people need to step back and look at what was left of the power ministry when I took it over. This was a ministry that used to have over 50,000 staff. This ministry owned, I think, 23 or 25 generating companies, including Kainji, Shiruru, Jeba, Egbin, Saple, Our Farm, and so on. And all of what are now the discos used to belong to that same ministry. But by the time I took office, all of these assets had been sold. So the power and the control that ministers of power before me had been taken away by a very, very well-intended privatization process. It was exciting, it was challenging, because it was a big issue on the Nigerian developmental sheet, but I didn't feel overworked. It was quite challenging, and I love challenges anyway.
Didn't you feel deflated that, I mean, this is you having 3, and then all of a sudden they said, come, cut it to 2, let's give him 2. What do you think was behind that decision? Didn't you feel deflated that maybe the confidence reposed on you was just not, that it wasn't far-reaching?
Well, there are many views to that. Of course, I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I reflected on what could have happened. There are things that I think that I will talk about after much reflection. But the point to make, as I said to you, there's no personal attachment to any of these things. It's a public trust as far as I'm concerned. The privilege to serve is momentous. I value it very, very seriously, and every time that opportunity comes, I give it my best shot. I run my marathon like a sprint. I leave nothing behind. I give everything to it, and after that, I just walk away knowing that I'm giving it my best. Sometimes it's good enough, sometimes it falls short, and so that's life. You move on. In any event, you serve at the pleasure of the president. So the president didn't consult me when he was putting the ministries together. He didn't ask for my opinion. So why should I question his decision if he felt? And look, listen, there's so many Nigerians who also want the opportunities. So it could have been any reason. He didn't give me a reason, and I didn't ask him. So it could have been he wanted to bring more people in. It could have been he was dissatisfied with my performance. So many reasons, but I move on. And if he had said, look, go home, I'm done, you don't even have one, I move on too.
So were you satisfied with your own performance?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, that's why I recall some of the things we did, and I know that measuring back then, people, the feedback, because everything I do, I try to survey its impact on people. So having those surveys, and people were saying, okay, it was getting predictable, it was getting steady, which was my short-term objective, and there was a long-term objective in the roadmap that we issued at the time, that we were going to go from incremental to steady power and to uninterrupted power. I was not going to come and promise anybody any specific thousands of megawatts. Even if it's 1 unit, 1 joule of energy, my responsibility and my plan was, how do we share it in a way that you can plan your life?
Let's take you on what you said earlier when you said, you only retrospect after you've left office. Now, in the case of power, I mean, it's been 4 years, and it would seem we still haven't gotten it right, power-wise. Well, and now looking at it from the big picture and being away from it, as you have been, what would you say? I mean, if you're talking to the ordinary Nigerian now, not the intellectuals, I mean, how would you encapsulate the problem of power here in Nigeria?
Well, I've told myself that I will respect the territory of my colleagues, and the present Minister of Power actually used to be a Minister of State with me in this ministry. And I think it is professional to do that. But what I do know, and people may disagree, is that the way we have understood power is different from the way it actually exists in other jurisdictions. So we've understood power only in terms of what is on the grid. And, you know, I asked people, and this was a debate I had also in our ministerial retreat, and I said, we're underreporting the power we generate. And people said, what are you talking about? I said, look, I'm not a scientist and I'm not an engineer, but I do realize and I understand that the smallest unit of energy is 1 joule. And that unit of energy owes no affiliation to the source that produces it, whether it is produced by hydro, whether it is produced by coal, whether it is produced by diesel or by gas. It's just energy. So let us see. We cannot be reporting a GDP of so many billions of dollars and still be telling ourselves that we are generating only 4,000 megawatts of electricity. That doesn't make sense. Otherwise, it will be the 8th wonder of the world that we're performing. And in my exposure in that industry, one of the things I've seen is that almost every power production is a generator. So we must account, as we report that GDP, we must account for every unit of electricity that produces it, whether it's privately generated or publicly generated. And when we talk about countries that have so much energy, all of the energy is not on the grid. There are also off-grid mini-grids that is recorded as the totality of energy produced. So these are conversations that I'm developing into a book. Hopefully it will help the next team sit back and say, hey, maybe there was a misdiagnosis here.
Did you confront corruption, and did corruption fight back?
Oh, okay. You see, again, I see that we learn in sound bites. So when somebody like our president says, okay, we're confronting corruption and corruption fights back, and we own that as corruption fights back everywhere in the world, because when it becomes organized. So, yes, we saw instances of people either abusing their office. I got petitions from all over the country. One of your officers has done this. I'm not there. So I must use the system to say, go and investigate this and give me a report. Sometimes also what is reported as corruption turns out not to be so. Sometimes, in some cases, there has been abuse of office, and I say, escalate it to the head of service. Because for what people might not know, I once told some young people during the NSAS protests, I was engaging with them, that look, the president has said, okay, I hear you. Let's talk about these things. I said, no, he should have sacked. I said, the president can't sack a public servant, a civil servant. A civil servant. His driver, if his driver is a civil servant, he can't sack him. And they were surprised. Say he's not his employee. He's an employee of the Civil Service Commission. President can only say, this person has done this. I don't want him to work for me again. Deploy him. Then the civil service system deals with it. In the same way, the president can sack a policeman. He's an employee of the Police Service Commission. So in that same way, I don't have the powers to sack a civil servant here. So I must move him to the administrative system that can deal with issues concerning them. So this is how we have moved on. But also, I mean, I'm not oblivious of the fact that the way we keep records, these files, provides a fertile ground for those who are so minded to alter things. So one of the things I've invested my time in here is to digitize all the records of this ministry. So you can then have digital files with digital footprints and metadata. But that even itself doesn't mean that a very skilled person can still not alter data. But it's a movement away from this. The one we have completed is the lands section, all the federal land registry under our ministry. We fully digitized the entire registry now. We've scanned 53,000 or so, 53,000 files. That's over 2.4 million pages of records now fully digitized. Again, those are things that you do in order to be able to have tracking and all of that.
Okay. So you just talked about documentation as a way of fighting corruption. Yeah. When you document, it's very, I mean, it's there for anyone who wants to look in the books.
Creates transparency and accountability.
Yes. So, but there are two factions to it. We have a systematic one and we have personalized corruption. And I'm asking this question against the saying, because you were quoted as saying, may your loyalty not be tested. Mm-hmm. So, looking at that in that perspective, would you say you have bent the rules at some point because of, the personalities that are involved?
Well, I'm struggling. I would ask you to be direct in your question because I can't imagine.
No, I want to generalize.
I can't imagine what you want me to speak to. The question about loyalty, I think that people didn't understand me. And, I like to keep my gunpowder dry on the matter because one day I hope I will be able to write about it. But when somebody was asking me, would you be loyal? I think that was a question that came up. Would you be loyal to so? And I told him that, well, I've seen people pledge loyalties. I don't pledge loyalties. And that is the context, because you don't know how that loyalty will actually be tested. So I'm loyal to you. You are my sister or you are my brother. Will I take a bullet for you?
You may decide.
So don't even pledge it. Do it when it comes. Because you don't know how it will come. And that was the context in which I was speaking. Because I've seen people, this is a very, very humbling story of life for me. People who had a parent, a parent who needed medical help. First, they struggled to get the financial means. Having now got the financial means, it was who of the children would donate a kidney to save their mother. And they fought to the bitterest end. No, she's your mother. No, she's your mother. And that was a test of their loyalty. But they loved their mother. I saw that at first hand as governor. And of course, I go back to say, hey, what was happening here? That was their loyalty call. They failed. To the mother that gave them life. It was something I reflected on, and I've looked back again, all of the stories of loyalty, and what you see really is that life is a story of betrayals. But it's a subject for another day.
Oh, that's very deep. That's really very deep, because now you're looking at loyalty and integrity. So if you have to choose between loyalty and integrity?
One governor when he was telling me the story of his ordeal, left me with a memorable quote. He said, "Man is a mystery until he reveals himself." And I will never forget that.
Have you had cause to reveal yourself?
I think I have revealed all of myself, or almost all of it.
Okay, we'll leave it. We'll leave it at that. Now, before we move the goalpost, these low-cost housing schemes that you talk about, are they really for federal government staff, or is just open to all? Because I mean, these are questions that have been asked, and we need to have clarity.
So first of all, again, we need to have definition. I have never, and I say this touch wood, because I think I've been careful enough with how I express myself. I don't recall me ever offering anybody low-cost housing. I've always spoken to the principle of affordable housing.
When you talk about affordable to who?
Wait a minute. So let's just affordability is a function of many factors, including how you pay. Okay? And then including what you earn, and including what you want to buy. So I tell people also that I can't imagine a fresh graduate wanting to buy a house in Metama or in Asokoro. Because in most parts of the civilized world, your road to housing is called a housing ladder. You enter either by living in the suburbs. As a young graduate, you commute. As you go higher in your career or in your business, you earn more money, you move. So again, back to definition about low cost, I didn't use low cost, but it doesn't matter. The global principle, I tell you about principle. The global principle by every government is to deliver affordable housing. Every government in the world. Every society indeed, because it's not government alone. Now, there are terms that have been used, and at our last meeting on Shelter Africa, this was also a point I addressed during the panel sessions. Somebody was talking of social housing. Somebody was talking about mass housing. So I asked them, are you using these terms interchangeably? They don't mean the same thing. Social housing is housing built for rent. In the international definition. Mass housing is not the same thing as social housing. Because the origin and etymology of mass housing is a housing project enunciated for Massachusetts states. But because of the mass in the SS, they started and people have taken it for houses for the mass of people. They mean different things. So the global standard is affordable housing. And that is a combination of pricing, it's a combination of fiscal and monetary policy as well, and it's also a function of mortgage systems and land value controls.
You just talked about affordable housing. Now, looking at the civil servant, realistically, I mean, given their pay grades and all of that, is it within the reach of the civil servant?
We built for them, and I can tell you confidently that many civil and public servants are beneficiaries of some of the things we have built. If you look at the last one that we did at Zuba, President handed keys to people. All of them were public servants.
Were they subsidized in any way?
No, we don't subsidize housing yet. Maybe Nigeria will get there someday. America subsidizes rent, or we don't. So, but you know that there's this National Housing Fund managed by the Federal Mortgage Bank. So through that platform, they can get mortgage loans. They can get rent support loans. So that is a platform that helps some of them to pay. We've also initiated what we call a rent-to-own policy for those who cannot afford to buy at once. So we have catered to three bands of people in a spectrum. That's as affordable as I think we can be for now. That doesn't mean the door is closed to doing other things. One of the things I would like to see done going forward is how government consciously deploys fiscal policy and monetary policy to converge around the housing. I want to see some of the initiatives that have gone into sectors like agric, for example, go into housing. But look, we are cooking a large pot of stew, so let's solve one problem
at a time. So now we look at the housing deficit and we look at Abuja, for instance. There are so many houses that are unoccupied. And I've heard you talk about it, that if you had your way, you would evenly distribute it in such a way that those houses are not lying fallow. Were you able to address it at any point in your tenure?
Well, we tried. Where, you see, again, you have to be clear in your diagnosis of what is causing a problem. Otherwise, you apply the wrong tools and the wrong remedies. Houses that you say and that I know are empty, the question I've asked is, why are they empty? Some of the feedback is that people are asking for 3 years rent, or they're asking for cash payment to buy. So, and I don't see housing as ownership alone. It's a combination of ownership and rental. So, and I'm wondering, okay, how can we unlock all of these things from 3 years maybe to 6 months? So I had a meeting with the Institute of Estate Surveyors, and I said, go and look at all of these things and look at houses that have been unoccupied for, let's say, I think the threshold was about 6 or so months. And let's find out what really is the problem. How can we get there? I think there was an inception report, but the work was never really concluded, I must admit. But it is work that needs to be done. But some of the feedback we got was also some of those houses were not built for the demography that has the real demand. That's the demography of my children, 30 and below. So you go and build one large house, en-suite bathroom, they don't want it anymore. That's not their thing. They're living in small spaces. They want small apartments because that's how they grew up. They want Wi-Fi, they want their backpack, they want a gym. So if you are building a massive kitchen, they eat out now. So they won't rent that house and they won't buy it.
Let's leave housing now, go into roads. There's this road, this Apapa road. It's been a perennial challenge.
Which Apapa?
Yeah, the whole of that Apapa corridor.
Okay.
You know, traffic, managing traffic, going in and out of Apapa has always been a challenge. I remember even the vice president intervened and he made some statements that today are still statements which have not really taken into fruition. So the question therefore is, I mean, given your expertise, how do we really address that corridor when it comes to road network, traffic, and given the fact that it's a business hub and is also contributing to national grid?
Okay, so let's go back to first principles. What's the problem? If you don't understand what's causing the problem, you can't solve it.
True.
When that logjam started, the logjam in Apapa, I spent some time, because of my knowledge of the place also, and I spent some time interacting with the operators. And they told me that, look, that it's the port system and all of that. Of course, there were issues. The road was bad. But they kept saying, and I have videos of a meeting I had with all the people using the port, clearing, shipping, forwarding, agents, everybody, truckers. And I have those videos. And they said, yes, we know the road is bad. But Minister, if you finish this road and they don't solve the other problems, nothing is going to happen. So, my takeaway then was the road was a contributory factor, not a causative factor. So let's get that clear. So what's causing the problem? We have outgrown that port. Let's just be honest with ourselves. So other countries are planning port expansions for 2050, 2060. And a port that we built in 1974, 75, 76, over 45 years ago, is still supporting our economy that has grown in multiples of its size when we built it. So it's like wearing the dress you wore as a teenager now. It's going to be uncomfortable if you manage to get inside it. That's what's happening. So let's not point road or whatever. We need port expansion quickly. Luckily, the Lekki seaport is now on stream. I'm proud again that I had a role to play in that project. Dredging also needs to be done to make some other ports attractive. And if you ask me, as I've recommended, there must also be discriminatory pricing, because not all of the cargo that is coming through the Lagos port ends in Lagos.
Okay. At least you have given us insight to that road network, because it's always been a challenge. I just thought that
we finished our
with
work
a spread of seaports across the corridors,
and
I mean, where there are opportunities, we should explore them.
Last long, but there is a problem already emerging on that also. I must put it out there in the public. People are trading on the road, so the road is not a marketplace. So governments at federal and state level must work together to remove all of those. Those are also issues of corruption and all of that. I mean, people break the law and start turning into a road to a market. There must be no room for that in any civilized society. They need to be.
Okay, so we rewind back to when you were the governor, because it's conversation with history. And we ask as many questions as time would permit. And this question will be on your stewardship while you were the governor, two-time governor. I remember the first one, super governor. And at some time when you were coming in at a second term, there were some hiccups, but the people spoke. And for some reason, everything was resolved. And
so are you saying I wasn't super again in the second term?
You were super. As a matter of fact, it was your super stardom that projected you to the national level, where they said, oh, he can do it. And for some reason, we now know the reasons why things went the way they went. Of course, we have it on record now. But in the course of your governorship, there was something that stood out, and I'm saying it against the backdrop of what is happening now. And that was that resident identity card. What exactly did you have in mind? What was the big picture?
Okay, so population of Lagos was growing at an alarming rate. Every success of Lagos was creating bigger challenges. And that's why you will see in the last elections, when people were fixated, Lagos was generating 51 billion, And I said, okay, you see only the income, you don't see the responsibility. So I never had cause to live abroad, so I don't know how this works. But I do know that everybody who goes to major cities abroad is either trying to get a driver's license or a national number or whatever. Because if you don't get an identity in those other cities or countries in the West, you are locked out of the financial system. You can't pay rent, you can't buy stuff, you can't open an account, you can't do anything. And I thought, okay, fine. If people are coming into Lagos, then welcome. But you can't be anonymous. So you must have a residence card. If you have a residence card, I know you are in town, I have your number, I have an idea of your location. So when we are planning water, we are planning refuse management, we are planning hospital beds, we are planning school classrooms, we can predict what demography you come into. And so when we are also levying tax, We can find you to contribute your quota. If it's going to be a commonwealth, it must be built by common contribution. So that was really the underpinning of the residence identity. We want you to identify yourself. And of course, it will go to issues of crime detection, crime management. It will go to so many other things. But you can't live in our community and be anonymous. And then to be what's the word now? To just take a free ride on everybody's back without contributing anything. So that was really it.
So how would you react to those who thought that, okay, there was some tribal, ethnic undertone to it?
Obviously, those were very off the target misconceptions, because everybody who lived and wanted to register was afforded an opportunity to register. That's what it's all about. You see, I've said before and I will say again, Lagos shares some things with global capitals of the world like New York, London, Montreal, and all of those type of cities, because they've thrived on immigrant capital. So if you don't value immigrant capital, you can't be a Lagos. It's a cultural melting point. Come and be all you can. There's an opportunity for you to do that.
So did you succeed with the mandate, the objective, the primary objective?
Oh yeah, we made progress. We couldn't conclude the exercise. You know, there's so many things sometimes that you can't complete, even if you are the visionary, and you have to pass it on.
You were two-time governor of Lagos State, and of course, recent happenings, especially this electoral cycle that just happened. So many things happened. So many things were brought to bear. And the question is, what's your perception of how Lagos literally turned into a tribal, some kind of tribal war almost happened in Lagos? And the question is, you were there at some point, and at your time, it wasn't an issue.
Sure.
But it became an issue in the last electoral cycle.
There were tensions in some parts of Lagos. So, in the place where I vote and lived in Surulere, anybody who is not afraid to confront the facts knows how mixed that place is in Surulere. So we did have tensions there. We voted. Everybody had a choice. So in some places there were flashpoints of extreme language and extreme understanding. And so again, we must continue to educate people that an election is not war. And if you don't do that education, very extreme and sometimes unfortunate incidents will take place. Elections for me are a contest of ideas, a festival to enjoy. And that was the way I campaigned as governor. So, and people also, and I'm happy to see that people are showing interest in the politics. It's good. But it doesn't end there. The political training must now start from primary school. The education must start from there. That this is not war. It's a contest of ideas. It's a contest of choices. It has nothing absolutely to do with where you were born, who you were born to. And, you know, I was telling one young person yesterday that clearly many of you know more about the American dream because it has been valorized and celebrated. But the Nigerian dream is bigger than the American dream if you stand back and watch it. If you see which head of a royal family has ever ruled Nigeria in all the presidents, which son of a king has ever ruled Nigeria. People from very humble backgrounds have risen from nothing to everything and gone onto the global stage. But we don't see that, do we? We don't even own it. So this is a place where people are coming from different continents, different countries, And in a manner of decades from hard work, they don't want to go again. This is where the global dream lies, depending on what you want to see. And as I tell people, I like to see angels, not devils. But let me tell you one thing. I don't know how much you know of the story of Lagos and how deep it goes. This has been long in the making. Let's leave it at that. It has been long in the making. It just came to the surface now. And so there's a lot of education, moderation of language. Language is the key. Words spoken. And then positions are taken.
So, you've been in government long enough. I mean, long enough.
To
have
Too
an
long.
opinion on restructuring. On restructuring.
Restructuring.
Yes. So let's talk about that. What's your idea? What's your idea of restructuring? Do you
I have
think
an
it needs to
opinion
happen?
on many things.
Good.
So, I've listened to the arguments extensively, and I wrote a speech about it actually, and I think you should read the speech, and maybe it would help. And maybe Akim, I wrote a speech about it that I delivered on behalf of the president at the Island Club. So there are those who want political restructuring. And there are those who want constitutional restructuring. So let's my sense first of all, is that as far as it relates to the Constitution, the public is being fed a wrong message in thinking that that power lies with the president. No. The power to make any constitutional amendment in aid of restructuring actually lies with us. We have elected senators, we have elected House of Reps members, they are representing us. If that issue is a serious enough issue, let our representatives pass the law to amend the Constitution. Let us have 2/3 of the state houses of assembly adopt it. And let us make those issues that will determine whether a senator or a House of Rep member or a House of Assembly gets our votes for the next time. How can, for example, a bill that goes to Parliament to amend the provisions relating to citizenship so that women can confer citizens on foreign husbands not pass? The women didn't make it an issue. I'm sorry. I know they tried. Now, my broad principles. Those who want restructuring, some of them say, oh, let's go back to parliamentary system. So when young people ask me, because I was a child when we last had the parliament, I said, well, if that was so good for us, why did it
collapse?
Why did it collapse, create violence, result in conflict, and ended in a civil war? But perhaps they are reaching to what they are comfortable with. And they don't like this presidential system. As a teenager, this was the first political system I operated with, the presidential system. I love it, in spite of its challenges. So, really, are we going to have debate around that? And then people say, restructuring. And with the political one, I ask, what do you want to change in the Constitution that has not been written before? Is it the part that proclaims we the people? People have lied about that and said the Constitution was written by the military and handed over to us. It's a lie. Go and read the Dr. Nikitobi report. They set up a Constitution drafting panel headed by Justice Nikitobi. They called for memoranda from around the world. People contributed overseas here, and they all said, give us back the 1979 Constitution. That's what people asked for, with some modifications. I have read that report. So people should stop all of these sound bites. The Constitution was dictated by me. It's a lie.
One of those who would also counter you by saying that the cost of governance is too expensive. So by way of restructuring, perhaps we may be able to have some level of cost containment.
Oh yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. Cost of government, in my view, if that is restructuring, itemize it as an issue. So let's go through it. So one of the things this administration is doing, for example, is that we are completing some of the federal secretariats that we met and building new ones. Because also, it's interesting this point has come up. So part of restructuring, creating more states, is also part of restructuring. From the last state creation exercise, we haven't solved all the problems that they created. So even that restructuring too has long-term consequences. So those states created at that time, I don't remember when the last one, we still have boundary issues unresolved between Nasarawa, Niger, Kaduna, and all over the country, because I am a member of the Boundary Commission chaired by the Vice President. So there are long-term issues. So let everybody come and say, this is what I want. My position has always been that there is no perfect constitution, and that what the people of Nigeria want is a better life, not a better document. And that even what exists currently, have we optimized it? Has said, okay, people have wanted state police. I ask people, how many states can fund a police? We've seen some of the examples now with Biagu and Motekun. How many are funding them? How many are managing them? Except a few.
The president-elect, what are those areas you think he would really make a difference, given your experience and your relationship with him, knowing his style of government and governance? Okay,
so I've seen people saying, oh, setting an agenda for the president-elect. I say, that's too late. The horse has bolted. You are trying to lock the stable after the horse has bolted. This man campaigned on a manifesto. The majority of Nigerians who elected him were persuaded by that manifesto. That's my view of how democracy works. So you can't set a new agenda. In terms of what would be different, well, the two different personality traits here, as I've said before. Buhari delegates, Ashwaju micromanages. So that would be a change in style. And Buhari works during the day, Ashwaju works more at night. That would be a change in style. What else? Interestingly, we are likely going to see now a legislative-heavy executive. And by that I mean we have 2 senators, 2 former governors as number 1 and number 2. We have a party chairman, also senator. So you will see perhaps the blend of legislative experience and previous executive experience combined in one. Buhari was never in parliament. So those are differences that you hope will help to build consensus, because democracy is about building consensus.
If you're called upon to be part of this government actively, like you have been in this administration, would you accept it?
I will serve my country as hard as I can.
Can you tell us on this program, let it be an exclusive, something they didn't know about Babatunde Raji Fashola?
I didn't like school.
How come you're this brilliant?
No, I'm not brilliant.
Oh, so what are you?
I'm not brilliant. I didn't like school, and I tell young people now that you know, listen to your parents. I'm here because my parents didn't give up on me. I was a very, very difficult child, but I tell parents also, slow it down. The child will mature, and I think that perhaps the people like the more mature side of me. I was very playful, didn't want to do any work, didn't want to study, just went to class when I liked, but here we are. It's been a long journey. I'm thankful to my parents, my family. So I play very hard. So,
work hard and play hard.
Yes. So I'm at the 2 extremes, and I've learned now to perhaps balance them. So when I'm busy having fun, heaven can wait.
Goodness.
Yeah.
But did you ever see yourself getting to this point?
No. I was the most unlikely person in public service. My first interaction with the public service was when I was posted to the Ministry of Justice in Edo State as a youth corper. I blatantly refused to work in government. I didn't like government. And my second experience after youth corps, my father got me a job in NIPOS. I said, no, I'm not working in government. Then when was the last time? And I said, no, I want to practice law and I want to be in a private sector law firm, not in government. So, but in 2002, Ashwaju sent for me and said, look, you can't go and be in private practice. Everybody is sacrificing something here, so come and sacrifice with me. So, and that's how I entered government, and I realized that it was such a noble obligation to be a public servant and to be able to impact people on a scale that nothing in private sector can prepare you for.
Would you have done things differently? Is there anything you would have done differently?
I will start in the public service.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
The same public service that you...
Yeah, you know, I mean, getting to know it now, you know, one of the things, you know, how do I say this? My best days in government are when people walk away from my office with a smile. Those are my best days. A problem solved. So that's what being a public officer means to me. So when I hear that people now travel fewer kilometers on a road than 5 years ago, those are my best days. That's the reason why I have public office, to make it better, to make it easier.
And so on that note, I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
For being part of
Thank you for having me.
With
Thank you.
It's been an insightful conversation, and we hope that maybe when you start having your grandchildren, we'll have another conversation.
Hopefully.
Perhaps your views would have changed then.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so on that note, I want to say thank you so much for being part of a conversation with history. Until next time when we come your way, I'm THECLA WILKIE, and stay safe.